Hello, podcast world, fellow horticulturists, lovers of plants, gardeners, family, and friends. Welcome to Shrubby Buddies, the podcast, friends with Woodies for garden goodies. I'm host Matt Guthrie.
And I'm host Tim Fleischer. Coming at you from Central Ohio, Zone 6B. We're just a couple of public horticulturists and certified arborists with experience in education, landscape design, gardening, retail, and wholesale.
So grab a drink, polish your pruners, dust off that kneeling pad, and let's get down to business. Hey, Shrubby Buddies, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I am host Matthew C. Guthrie I, joined with my best good buddy, Timothy Daniel Fleischer, a.k.a. Two Things Timmy. How are you, Tim?
Matthew C., how are you? It's good to be here.
It is awesome to be here.
Rainy day. I love a good rainy day.
Yeah, man. Storms firing to the west of us. We got like radar scope pulled up on. We're weather nerds too, but we got weather scope pulled up, and we got that. I don't know what that other dude is on YouTube.
We got raindrops dribbling off the tin roof.
Yeah, tin roof.
Do you have a tin roof?
No.
That sounds like you do.
I got like dimensional shingles.
No.
Is that what they're called?
Raindrops bouncing off your dimensional shingles.
Yeah. Anyways, people don't care about all that. So, yeah. So, week 2. This week, we're going to talk about some early blooming spring woodies. But before we dive into all of that stuff, let's just do a little recap on our week. So, Tim, you got anything fun, exciting, unusual, newsworthy, any of that stuff?
Well, with the nicer weather, we've had the windows open at home, so I get to hear the outdoors a little more.
The fresh air, and the humidity from this rain's just
It's a little clammy, but it's nice at night. I can hear the low hum of the Columbus Airport. We live pretty close to that, and I don't know, I find it comforting. But then I also have been hearing a barred owl across the street.
Who cooks for you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she will go through times where it just does that call over and over again with like a 30-second pause. And
that's awesome.
I love it. It's really nice to listen to. There were spring peepers across the street, but those have pretty much stopped. I think they're done doing their peeping.
Yeah. I just have dogs that bark.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
You have a golf course back here, so soon you'll be hearing the sound of titanium smacking golf balls or whatever.
The old one wood smacking the Titleist one.
4?
That's right. Actually, we're on the green, so we hear the sound of the and the putters.
The Scotty Cameron putter face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people going, fuck.
I personally like the Adam Sandler Happy Gilmore hockey stick putter from Odyssey.
Yeah. You ever seen anyone back here using something like that?
Nah.
No.
Nope. Can't say that I have, but I don't pay that close of attention. So.
Yeah, old bent grass.
So, yeah, this week's just been kind of like getting stuff ready for spring at work. We got seasonal staff coming back next week from tomorrow, actually. Or a week from Monday. Today's Sunday. You're hearing this Wednesday, so they start Monday, April the 7th. But yeah, we went to the Botanical Symposium this year, the Ohio Botanical Symposium. It's every other year.
Yep.
Held in Columbus, and it's just a whole bunch of plant nerds that get together and geek out over, like, I don't know.
Yeah, this one's geared more towards the natural side of things, not necessarily horticulture. Learning about things, plants that are growing in bogs and in the woods and in prairies, and things like alvars and certain geological formations, lichens. So, just really fascinating stuff if you're into that botany.
Yeah, really cool. And the highlight for us, for you and I personally, is a friend of ours and one of the, the head botanist, lead botanist, or whatever for the state of Ohio. I don't know what his exact title is, but he's a botanist for the state of Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Andrew Lane Gibson, a.k.a. the Buckeye Botanist. He does a half-hour spiel on rare
rare and endangered,
Yeah.
and plants or new populations of plants to Ohio that have been found over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And there was lots. I mean, I think he said there was like 184 different records, and he moved through it fast. He didn't talk about each one of those, but he talked about many of the notable ones, and that's always very fascinating to us. And I think to me, I like the population of calycanthus sweet shrub that was found in Ohio, because we are just north of its native range, and it is one of my favorite landscape shrubs.
It's great. And it's great that they found that in Ohio. And
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you mentioned it.
Mhm.
And I think that it's super important that they found that here in Ohio.
Yes, agreed.
And anyone that's a horticulturist should be excited about that.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
So now you can say it's native to the state.
Yeah, exactly. Calycanthus,
Calycanthus floridus.
sweet shrub. It's great. So yeah, so we found that. We had some good food. It gives us a chance to catch up with certain individuals and people that we don't see all of the time, at these conferences.
Yeah, we
Give us a
talked to
chance
Greg Payton from Dawes. We talked to Mark Dilley from Mad Scientist / Scioto Gardens.
Jenny from Mad Scientist, and Andrew and his team, Iris and Sean and them, with the state of Ohio. He's got a fantastic team that really is like boots on the ground, and they just get turned out and turned loose in the southern parts of Ohio to, just look for this stuff. They kind of look at different things that haven't been found in Ohio in a long time, and they just kind of go out there and dive in. And
yeah, these are some smart people.
Yeah,
I mean, differentiating between different characters that you would just think, what are you looking at there to tell that's different from the next? So
yeah,
I kind of envy that type of knowledge. I do not have that.
yeah. So that was kind of our week, and I don't know. Looking forward to this coming week. I know you're off a couple of days, but got a busy 5 days at work coming up, and then I start next Saturday. I'm starting back part-time at the greenhouse, Dutch Mill Greenhouse, part of Leo Burby Bulb Company. Saw Bob today, and I'm excited to get back in there and work with them over there. It's a lot of fun.
Shout out to Bob and Nick and
Reagan and Chris and whoever the hell else,
all those fine folks.
So yeah. Anywho, so that's kind of been our week and our coming week. So Stigma anther pollen style. What's a bloomin' crocodile?
Whoa, what was that, Matt?
Do you like that?
I heard that. What was that?
Yeah, so that's the intro to a new segment that we're going to do every week, and that is a segment that's like a What's in Bloom segment. And each week we're going to talk about what's flowering, whether that be trees, shrubs. This time of the year, a lot of spring ephemeral stuff.
So just things that we've seen.
Yeah, things that we've seen around in our gardens and in the woods, and things that
like it.
So, see, just to give people an idea of what to keep their eye out for.
Perhaps a corresponding social media post too, where we can show a few pictures of these things too.
Yeah, and we're not going to spend much time on any of these. We're just going to kind of run down through a list, and that's that. So, Forsythia, blooming right now, yellow flowers. I'm sure everyone's familiar with it. Pulsatilla or pasque flower.
Talked about it last week.
Small perennial, minor blooming right now. Pulsatilla vulgaris in its beautiful purple flowers. Daffodils, of course. Snow trillium, which in our neck of the woods is not, I don't know that it's considered endangered, maybe threatened. It's not a very common trillium.
It's a rare trillium in that it has a very specific environment that it needs to grow in, which is the shallow limestone soils.
Yeah, and it's small. It's about the size of a quarter, and it blooms early. Hence the name Snow trillium. Hepatica, or sharp-lobed hepatica, is flowering now. The hellebores or the Lenten rose, reticulated iris, our maple trees, our elm trees, wedge hazels, crocus, snowdrops. Of course, the cherries are starting to flower. Lindera, or our native spice bush, flowers yellow. And Cornus moss, our cornelian cherry dogwood, which also flowers yellow. are what we're seeing right now blooming around Central Ohio. So
Yeah, a nice list right there.
yeah. So anyways, all right. So that's what's in bloom. Now we're going to get into this week's topic of early blooming spring woodies. So these are going to be trees and shrubs that we personally like using to add color to the spring garden.
We're talking about today. We're going to talk about things that have either just bloomed, are blooming right now as we speak, or are just on the cusp of blooming. So
Yeah,
the really early spring shrubs and trees that are blooming right now.
Stuff you're seeing flowering before you really see a whole lot of foliage. So.
Yeah, it's neat when you see things bloom before they get leaves, because the blooms are really able to stand out.
Yeah. Cool. So you want to get it started, or do you want me to?
You start.
Okay.
Pick something off this list that really, speaks to you.
Yeah, so what speaks to me, I'm going to start out with redbud, because it's like one of my favorite trees. So the redbuds are just starting to crack color a little bit. The buds are definitely really swollen. They're not in full bloom yet, but they're not far off from it. So this would be redbud in cultivars, like our native redbud tree and all of the million cultivars that go along with it. But yeah, you can get these things in really any shape and size, from, I shouldn't say size, because 20 to 25 foot on like some of the cultivars, or like our native ones, probably in that 20 foot by 20 foot range. But anything from that down to some of these low grafted weeping varieties that literally are like knee height and really hug the ground and kind of create a ground cover. But
what I love about redbuds is the ability for them to bloom even when they're very young.
Yeah.
And they bloom on the stems too.
Yeah.
So they just put on quite a show. And most of there's some white cultivars, but a lot of it's just that bright pink, almost like a lavender purple bloom. It is just brighter. So there's a lot of things blooming. There's yellow right now, and it's lovely. But this bright pink, that's really like, for me, that's like, hey, spring's here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these cultivars bloom well. A lot of times when you have cultivars of things, you're like, you have to sacrifice maybe the blooming. But with redbuds, all these cultivars bloom just like the species, which is great.
Or better. Like,
Yeah.
I just looked at one the other day that I was unfamiliar with called Pom Pom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally a double flower redbud. So you get these giant.
We need to get our hands on some of those.
Yeah, you get this giant flower on it. And then what's the other one? Oh, Appalachian Red. So think like your pretty lavender colored flowers on the redbud, and then intensify that with like more of like a pinky magenta. Yeah, and these things just are so bright and so beautiful, and just are great, the Appalachian Red. So yeah, but I mean, they still have the white red buds, and some that are even kind of a yellowy colored flower on them. Most of them, though, that you're going to find are going to be that kind of muted purpley, lilac-y kind of color. So,
yeah, so you pick your redbud, whatever you like. You like the variegated leaves, the purple leaves, whatever. You're going to get a great bloom display on whatever cultivar you get. And that's what we're talking about today, is the spring bloom display. And they're just about to pop. I always think about them as first week of April.
mm-hmm.
That's where I always kind of put them in my brain. So
yeah, and they do well. They do well in sun. They do well in some shade, not dense shade. I've planted some in dense shade that do fine, but
yeah,
a little bit of sun will do them right. So
yeah, if you think native, they grow like along the wood's edge. So that's kind of like a partial sun situation is what they like best.
For sure. So redbuds, people, go out, get them. There's one for everyone. Doesn't matter if you got a little tight spot you need to stick your woody in,
mm-hmm.
or if you've got a big old gaping hole in your garden that you need to stick your woody in.
Yes, they will.
You'll find
it'll fill all the holes.
You'll fill every one of those holes. So,
perfect.
Yeah. So okay, redbud. What's up next, Bob?
Well, keeping on the idea of something that's not quite blooming yet, but it's going to be blooming soon, and that's serviceberry.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of those trees that I love because it has a true 4-season interest. It has a really nice striped bark, for when it doesn't have leaves, and it has a nice form. It has superior fall color and delicious berries.
Nature's candy.
The berries are fantastic. But today we're focusing on the flowers, and the blooms are They're white flowers with these. The petals aren't super short, but they're kind of like long and strappy, and they're just a bright white, and they often bloom right at the same time as a red bud.
Yep.
So we recently cut down our serviceberry in our front yard because its stems started to die on it, and it's a bummer, but it always bloomed exactly the same time as our red bud next to it, and it made the front of the house look so pretty. But problem with serviceberries is you have good years and bad years because they are in the rose family. So when I say rose family, obviously roses are in that family. Crab apples, hawthorns. There's another one on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, serviceberries, they're in the rose family, and rose family plants are just notorious for fungal diseases and different types of blights and leaf spotting. So
Fire blight.
that's the bummer with them.
Yeah.
Is that they have good years and bad years, and they're very sensitive to certain, if it's extra humid and hot, those fungal things are just exacerbated. So bummer for that, but usually in their flowering stage, they're pretty charming.
Do they get the apple cedar rust then? Or something similar to it?
Maybe we had all those,
hawthorns,
the fruits on them last year. Remember, they all had like the fruiting bodies coming out of them. And I mean, a lot of this is purely cosmetic. Like, it's not going to kill them necessarily. Some of it will, but it's just a bummer. But it's a great tree. And interestingly enough, with the term serviceberry, it gets its name because when early settlers were here, like pre statehood United States, the people would pass away in the wintertime and the ground would be frozen solid. So the serviceberry blooms would be an indicator that the ground was thawed enough, far enough down in order to be able to dig a grave. Hence the word serviceberry.
Knowledge nugget. Love it.
Yeah.
I didn't know
Funeral
that.
service. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how they got their name. So they tend to bloom when the ground is fully thawed.
Okay.
So
no, I like that. I didn't know that little knowledge nugget you just dropped on
there you go, bud.
myself and all of the listeners. I appreciate that, Timmy. You're just full of these little knowledge nuggets, right?
But yeah, a lovely native, small to medium-sized tree. Often you can find it multi-stemmed at the garden center, so like more of a large shrub type thing. But we had one in the yard for a while. You had given it to us. It was like extra from a job, and we just couldn't keep the deer off of it. They just kept munching it down.
Oh,
so
cool.
Just FYI.
Cool. The one that I gave you just cut down, let die.
Well, it was just a multi-stem. We couldn't get it to outgrow the deer.
It's cool, bub.
Get out of here.
Let's see where
What
we're at.
do you want to talk about next?
So staying on this kind of tree path that we're down right now, we haven't hit on too many shrubs yet. I'm going to just throw this out there with early magnolias. I'm sure you've all seen magnolias flowering right now. The white ones are really standing out right now, the star magnolias. And the big tree, like pinky colored flower, the saucer magnolias are in full flower right now. And then I haven't seen any of the hybrid magnolias, the butterflies, which is that kind of like yellowy, kind of muted yellowy colored flower. I haven't
Buttered
seen it.
yellow.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those in flower yet, but I've seen some with very swollen flower buds. So
yeah, and that's just 3 of many magnolias. There's tons of magnolias. In fact, if you're listening, Peter Zale, which he's probably not, Peter Zale is a magnolia expert, and he'd be like, well, why are you forgetting this one and that one? Well, because we don't know as much about his magnolias as you do. But there's some lovely magnolias that Matt and I love for later in the season, but those aren't putting on their blooms this time of year. And so these are the 3 that we're seeing out there that we really like. So
yeah. And the saucers would be something for it, that you would want to use in kind of an area where you really have some room for them to grow, because they will grow into nice big mature trees. The star magnolias tend to stay a little bit on the smaller side. So there's something that could fit maybe into your landscape a little bit more ornamentally. And I think same with the butterflies too.
The thing that sucks about these magnolias blooming this early is that once those petals come out, they're very sensitive to the frost. So if we get frosts, these petals, these things just turn brown and fall off. So this year we've had a pretty good luck though. As I'm driving around where I live, I'm actually surprised, like
Yeah,
how
everything looks
long the magnolias have been blooming. So it's really the star magnolias that get bit the bit worse because they've got thinner petals. But
Yeah.
Magnolias are great trees. These three particularly, other than when they bloom, they don't really do much for the landscape. They're kind of this one season plant. We'll talk about the other magnolias that I think have more of a full season interest later on this season. But these are the three you see out there right now, and they really are striking. They're gorgeous.
Love them.
Yeah.
Yeah. This time of the year is great.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of winter just to see color is always fun. So
yeah.
Cool. So we got magnolias we've talked about. We've talked about service-bearing redbud. What do you got?
I'm going to move out of the trees for a moment, and I'm going to move to spice bush. Our native spice bush, Lindera benzoin.
Love it.
Benzoin. I'm telling you, these things will light up a woodlot. If you can find a wooded area, maybe that's a little bit moist, this time of year that's not just surrounded by honeysuckle and you can kind of see into it, the blooms are like the bright, it's like a neon yellow.
It really is, yeah.
Of the spice bush just light up the understory. And it's really cool seeing that something native that's just growing on its own here do that. Right? So
you say understory, and that is something to add. So this would be a good shrub if you have kind of a moist area, maybe a lower lying area.
And, that said, they'll also do fine in a dry area once established too.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm just used to seeing them growing like a native setting would be around
in a wetter woods,
or like lower lying areas and woods where they're going to be provided with a little bit more water.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, still an understory shrub,
like straight up in the middle of the woods.
Yeah,
like
so these
full
things
shade.
Can take shade, and they are neon yellow, like when they're flowering, but just as nice as when those flower buds completely open as I love just before they open, you get these tight little round, like yellow pearls that just kind of are all over the stems.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's super pretty too. These just perfectly round yellow flower buds that just kind of sit the whole length of the stem on those things.
For sure. And these are a dioecious plant, which means there's male plants and female plants. So if you really got in there and started looking around, you'd see that some of the plants' blooms are way more showy.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be the female ones.
Of course.
The male blooms are still there, but it's the female ones that are putting on the show. Host to a spice bush swallowtail butterfly, so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Really cool caterpillar for that one.
Yep.
So
you ever found one?
I have, but not. I've seen them like at garden centers, at nursery. No, at Willoway.
Okay,
so one time I was buying a spice bush and they were covered in them. But no, I've never been able to just like find one in the
woods. I know that we've gone on.
Annoying.
We've been on spice bush swallowtail caterpillar hunts.
Well, these things, they look like little snakes because they've got a fake eye on the butt end. So birds think they're snakes, so they don't eat them. But they're like the same color green as the leaves. So I know we've seen them. We just haven't seen them.
Man, we need to find one.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but they're beautiful, beautiful little caterpillars. But great plan if you're looking for something native, especially if you've got shade.
Yeah, spice bush.
True full shade plant.
Cornus moss, sticking with the yellow flower.
Very similar looking flower.
Very similar looking flower. A little bit more ornamental looking. More sun. So they're in the landscape. They're kind of in a tight kind of bigger shrubby type plant. Native, they kind of are a little bit more gangly looking, I guess. And then I've also seen them pruned into really nice tree form stuff, like at Chicago Botanical Gardens.
Yeah, I like the idea of them in a single stem.
They have them pruned into single stem, very nice looking trees. We have some in Dublin that are pruned into 3 or 4 main kind of stems, like you would see on a serviceberry or
redbud.
On a redbud, into kind of a tree form. We also have them where we've just let them go into shrub form.
Yeah, and like Matt said, Cornus moss, it's Cornelian cherry dogwood is the common name for that.
Yep.
And it's related to the dogwoods.
Yeah,
but a very different bloom than when you think of like Cornus Florida, like our native tree dogwood. Very, very different.
Yeah, that doesn't have the big white bracts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just these kind of spice bushy looking yellow flowers. Maybe the flower's a little bit bigger, but that
Yeah.
flower eventually turns into like a red, almost looks like a red cherry that hangs off of it in the fall.
And I always associate the bloom of this to be during March Madness, because I don't know if you remember a few years back, not a few years, like a long time ago, we had to take some photos for our
Like social
media
yeah.
team, and we like took pictures of it by basketball hoops
Yeah.
for the start of March
I
Madness.
do remember that. Yeah.
Remember
yeah,
that?
over
That
at Hawk
Hawk
Nest
Nest?
Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool plant. One of those ones it's a nice plant, but you're only going to notice it this time of year when you're driving by. Otherwise, it's just, it's a green plant. It does make red berries that are edible, very astringent, but people make like jam out of them. I think you have to add tons of sugar to them to make them taste good.
Yeah. I mean, I know they're edible, but I don't have any interest.
If I see them, I give them a nibble just to see if my palate's changed.
It
And
hasn't
it hasn't.
changed.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So that's Cornus moss. Do you want to hit one, or you want me to keep going here?
We'll just stick with the yellow, and I'll say forsythia. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on forsythia. It's been blooming. It's still blooming. It's everywhere. I hate it when people trim forsythia into a
box,
or I hate that look.
If you do it, that's fine, people. It's just
that's just
a preference. Yeah.
I think forsythia is like a great sprawling shrub if you've got an area that you need screened, or like along the wood edge or along your property line where you just want to let it go and it can just do its thing. But when you start making it look tidy, it just looks weird, doesn't it?
Yeah. I personally like how it kind of arches as it gets more mature. It kind of shoots up and kind of arches over and back down towards the ground. That's the look that I personally like.
And if it gets too messy for you, you can just straight up cut it back, just shear it down, and it'll regenerate back. And it's one of those funny ones where we always tell you not to prune your plants, woodies that bloom on old wood. You could prune these any time of year. You could have pruned these 3 weeks ago and they still would have somehow bloomed.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
they're just
exactly.
weird. They're just weird like that.
I told my brother Chris and his wife Sabrina, they have, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 of them on one side of their property that kind of screens out between their yard and a neighbor's yard. They had these big forsythia that were just like overgrown. They got real woody. They were old, just those old thick canes. They weren't blooming very good. And I told Sabrina, I'm like, bro, just get in there and just start hacking these things out, cut them back. I don't care if you cut them back to the ground, but like get in there and take all that dead wood out of there. And she did that. And they didn't bloom good for her that next year or whatever. But she was like, Maddie, you told me to do this and it killed my forsythia, And I'm like, and that was like 2 years ago and they were already massive again, so.
You can do whatever you want to these.
Mm-hmm.
Not a native plant, but not anything that I consider a problem. We've got some areas in Dublin where, I'm thinking of like Hutchins specifically, where it was an old homestead and now it's a wooded area, and the forsythias that were there by the homestead have just stayed in place. It's not like you're finding the forsythias growing throughout the woods like you have some of the things. So definitely not a problem with invasiveness this moment.
Yeah. Cool. So that's forsythia, and let's hit on some witch hazels, bub.
Ooh, yeah.
I know witch hazels are like definitely your thing. So I'm going to kind of hand the witch hazels over to you and let you do a little bit more talk on them, because I don't feel as comfortable talking about witch hazel as you do. So, have at it.
Okay. Well, I do love witch hazel, and it's one of my favorites because it has really, really unique flowers. Long, strappy petals. A lot of times the yellow ones are mistaken for forsythia because they bloom so early, but they're not. They're way better than forsythia.
Like the Arnold Promise witch hazels. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the X intermedius.
Yeah, so there's tons of different species of witch hazel, but there's really 3 that we deal with in the horticulture trade. One we're not going to talk about, and that's Hamamelis virginiana. which is common witch hazel, but that one blooms late fall,
Mm-hmm.
November, December. So we're not worried about that one right now.
Remember, I did a TikTok, Shrubby Buddies TikTok on that last year.
Yeah, you did.
So
You did. Witch hazel is this? Is that what you said?
No.
Okay. I was thinking of a different TikTok. But then we've got our vernal witch hazel, also called Ozark witch hazel, and it grows native in the Ozarks and in the southeastern part of the United States. Not quite native to Ohio, but native to the eastern United States. It blooms, so Hamamelis vernalis, vernal meaning spring, so it blooms now. And in fact, I've seen this in bloom as early as January. But it'll bloom January, February, March. It's probably finishing up right now.
Yeah.
We got the goofy look at me for
I
it.
don't know.
You like listening to me talk about witch hazel? Does that
Oh, yeah.
make you happy?
I like the enthusiasm that you have whenever you talk about witch hazel.
I do love them. Not a whole lot of cultivars. You get like a yellowish to orange, a lot of orange when I see these out. Is this what you've got at Indian Run Meadows, the big ones? They're blooming now, or are those commons?
That's common.
Okay. So, but what I think is the better one, if you want one for your garden, and it's the non-native one, it's the Hamamelis ex intermedia.
Wait, I lied. It's not common.
No,
The ones that I have are the
vernal.
vernal. Yeah. So those are vernal because I was thinking common because they do bloom so early that I am almost certain I've taken photographs of these things like late December in flower.
Perhaps.
So
yeah, I always thought the color of them
they were
the orange.
They are orange. Yep.
Wonderful plants, but the intermediate ones, which are a hybrid between japonica and mollis, which is Japanese and Chinese witch hazel, they just have much better blooms. I'm sorry, they're just, the flower petals are like 2-3 times longer. The scent is really nice. Some people can't smell it. I know that sometimes I've seen you walk up to it and I just can't smell it.
So for me personally, like there's some that the smell is there.
Yeah.
And then some I can't smell, or if there is a smell, it's like very, very faint. There's not much to it.
Witch hazels, you really got to get your nose on them. Like you got to be sucking those strappy petals up your nostrils.
Bro, I lick them, I stick them, and then I jab them up my nose, and I still can't smell them.
I was wondering where you were going to jab them, but I'm glad it was up your nose. 3 of the more common intermediate ones are Gelina, which is orange, which is a really nice, it's like yellow, orange, red, almost like it looks like flames, the blooms. Then there's Diane, which is what I have at home, and that's more of like a reddish magenta bloom.
Okay.
And then Arnold Promise, which is a bright yellow bloom, kind of like forsythia. And I was telling Megan the other day, I regret not buying that one instead, because it would look way better against our brick house.
Who's to say you can't add one somewhere?
I guess we could. could. Our Diane's doing really well where it's at, though.
Did you not want to mention Shibamichi Red?
Well, I hadn't gotten there yet.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Another intermediate one, that I wasn't actually going to mention it, but I'm glad you said it. We have in our arboretum in Dublin is Shibamichi Red. It was donated to us by the Dawes Arboretum long time ago.
Yeah.
And it got whacked by deer shortly after it made it in the arboretum, like whacked hard. And it's made a recovery, and it's probably 7 feet tall now?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting there. Yeah.
It's not real full, but it's in full bloom right now, and it is beautiful, and it's got a really nice... It's red, but it's more like a deep pink, like magenta. It's really... It's nice, isn't it?
It is.
Color on that is really
you
nice.
took some photos the other day. You shared.
Yeah, I got some shots of the sunlight coming through the petals. But yeah, so thank you, Dawes. Even though I thanked you before, I'll thank you again. But yeah, I get really excited about witch hazels.
I know
really,
you do.
Anything in this plant family, with the early blooms and the great fall color, I just love them. So
yep, you're all about them witch hazels.
I do. Yeah,
so.
Get yourself a witch hazel. Like if you're on the fence about something and blah blah blah, should I get a forsythia or witch hazel? Get yourself a witch hazel. You won't regret it.
Yeah,
I promise. Because it's not just the blooms. I know we're just talking about the blooms today, but we got fall color and we got form, and everything about them is just spectac.
And another one that you love that I always tease you about is corylus, or our I just drew a blank. Crap, help me out here.
Filbert.
Yeah.
So it's our native filbert.
Yeah. So corylus, and it flowers.
Yeah. Are you
Not
are you
right now.
Are you finna make fun of me right now?
Yeah, I am. So
it already
I've
bloomed.
made fun of you before. So the corylus flower is this little pinky red kind of magenta flower, and
It almost looks just like a witch hazel flower with strappy, like bright pink petals. That
strappy bright pink petals. And when he says strappy, okay, you a hand lens won't work here, people. You need a microscope to see this flower. Tim's used to dealing with microscopes to see things.
Yeah, it's not the only thing I've used a microscope to find.
That's right, or a microphone, either one. But yeah, so our native filbert, the corylus, it's a hazel, right?
Yeah, corylus americana. Hazelnuts and filbert
hazelnut,
nuts are the same thing. They're even the non-native ones like Corylus calerna and like the Turkish filberts. They all have these similar blooms that are very inconspicuous, but if you look close enough,
inconspicuous is very true.
If you look close enough, you can appreciate the daintiness of the bloom.
I took some nice photos of them with a macro lens a few years back. We'll have to throw those up on the gram so people can see what we're talking about.
It's really
when I talk about this little tiny corylus.
It's really hard to even photograph with a iPhone because they're so small. It's really hard to get focused in on them. But
yeah, I had like a 20 time.
If you know what you're looking for, it's really cool. And it's the female flowers, and the male flowers are these big long catkins, and it's a cool plant. So,
yeah,
make fun of me all you want.
All right, well, I just did, and you can make fun of me for mentioning this one. And I'm not going to spend much time on it just because I'm not a huge fan, but it is worth noting because there's a lot of people that do like these. There's a lot of people that there's so many better options than this, but for some people, this may be an option that you want to use in the landscape, and that would be our cherry trees are flowering now. So the weeping cherries, and then, just
okami cherries.
Yeah, the okami. I can't think of all the different names of them right now, but yeah. So like our ornamental cherries are all flowering right now. So
yeah, cherries are like crab apples in that they put on a nice show for like a week or two in the spring. And then they just kind of suck.
And then they get diseases, and they get
black knot and any fungus you can think of. And, they have cultivars that are supposed to be more resistant to this and more resistant to that. But you know what? You give me that or a red bud, I'm planting the red bud 110% of the time over the cherry.
I know there's people listening that are going to get a little butthurt about this.
Yes.
So,
and I appreciate the history, like especially like the cherries in Japan and the cherries in Washington D.C. Like, I appreciate all that.
Yeah,
I just don't care to use them in the landscaping that I do, and they sucker at the base quite a bit, and they're just more work than they're worth.
Not to mention, like every other person in any residential neighborhood has like the typical, I'm going to plant by my front porch or corner of the house, white weeping dogwood.
Cherry.
Yeah, cherry. I'm sorry. And there's just so many better options, people. But nonetheless, we're talking about spring flowering woodies, trees, shrubs that can work in the landscape. And that definitely.
And you can't blame, here's the thing. The garden centers, they can sell these things quick because they get them in bloom. And people are just excited, and they see them, and they just buy them up.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't blame anyone because the garden centers are making money, the growers are making money, the people are buying them. They're creating color in their yard. So
they work in spots where a lot of other trees don't work. So
correct.
But the last plant we're going to talk about isn't necessarily a flowering plant, but it
is a flowering plant, but we're not talking about the blooms.
Yeah, so it doesn't flower now. It flowers later in the year, but it is worth mentioning. It is your favorite genus of plant, right?
Yes. It's my favorite native tree.
Okay.
For sure.
So, so why don't you tell tell the people about what it is that
Matt's having microphones
I am.
again.
Just talk while I fix this.
I thought you were the one that was good at putting the microphones up. Looks like I won. Aesculus or Buckeyes. So, when Buckeyes start to open their leaves, when their leaves start to come out this time of year, like right now, we call it the unfurling because these buds, Buckeyes have large flower buds, just large buds in general. And if you've ever seen,
you like big buds, and you cannot lie.
I do, and I like it when they swell up,
and
then these leaves start to emerge, and
you unfurl.
It's crazy what you get to see out there. You see so much variability, like walking around. I'm just talking about Ohio Buckeyes in the woods around central Ohio. The leaves start to come out, and from a distance, they look like a flower.
Yeah.
They look like a big old flower. And the variability is crazy. Sometimes it's like coppery. Sometimes it's maroon, bright red, mixed with green.
They look metallic, too. They have this such a shine to them, especially when it's that, like, coppery color.
They almost look like when you see people that are growing, like, really nice strains of pot.
Yeah.
And these buds with these leaves kind of open up. They just remind you of that.
It's very much like, it reminds me of like marijuana plant when it's flowering.
Yeah. When the leaves are
unfurling.
So get out in your woods, and if you know there's Buckeyes around, you won't be able to miss them this time of year.
Yeah.
The unfurling. So, also some of the best blooms of any of our native trees are the Buckeye blooms, but they bloom later. I would say late April all the way into early May. So
yeah, we'll hit on those more. So cool. So that kind of wraps up our list of early season woodies for the garden, or
Aesculus glabra, bro.
Yeah, whatever we're calling this. I mean, there's some honorable mention type things that are going to bloom a little bit later than what we're seeing right now. Maybe like late to mid-spring, but still they're going to flower before they start to put on foliage. So we can just hit on those real quick. It'd be like Cornus Florida, or our native dogwood, white flowering dogwood. The Fothergillas,
which are with the same family as witch hazel.
Yeah. Viburnum prunifolium, or our black hall viburnum, and then the
Chiananthus.
Yeah.
White fringe tree.
Yeah, fringe tree. So and took the words right out of my mouth.
I did, and I think we've told this story before. The Chiananthus fringe tree blooms are incredible. I mean, they're just, when you have a fringe tree, and usually they're in a shrub form. They say tree, but it's a shrub form. When they bloom, they are one of the coolest things you'll see. And I think some of the nicest ones we have in Dublin are in the South Pool.
And no one sees them flower.
Within the confines of the pool, like right near the diving boards.
Mm-hmm.
And the only people that see them in flower are us when we go in there to do some like maintenance on like leaf removal and pruning. But people that come to the pool, they've long flowered. And
literally the main shrubs that are in that pool are, I haven't been in there in a while, but it's fringe tree and
magnolias.
There's magnolias and there's dwarf Korean lilac. So it's like all stuff that's flowering before the pool's open Memorial Day weekend. So it's like,
this is no one's fault that we work with. These things have been there they're very old, mature things, and it's just how it is. But I like how we always get a peek at those.
I mean, I think that's just like a landscape architect put it together and just wasn't using their brain.
Yeah.
Like, I like the look of a lilac and the look of a magnolia and the look of a fringe tree. Let's stick them in there, not thinking about like this stuff's going to flower a month before the pool ever even opens.
Yeah, because those types of things that we just mentioned, when they're not blooming, they're just a shrub with green leaves.
They're whatever,
Yeah. So
blah, whatever. They're just
blah.
filling space. So cool. So that kind of wraps up this week's episode. Unless you have anything you want to add to this, Tim?
I think it was a good list. I mean, we definitely left a few things out, but I think we hit on the things that really gets my what does old Riverside natives say?
It really rings your clangor.
Really what's his name? Ed Caprelli.
Yeah.
Old Ed Caprelli really rings my clangor. So I think we're good.
Yeah. So awesome, people. That kind of does it for Season 2, Episode 2, Early Blooming Spring Woodies for the landscape. Thanks for listening along. We look forward to doing this again for you next week. Not sure what the topic is, but whatever it is, I'm sure it will be fun. no matter what. So
In the meantime, pay attention to those Woodies, give them some love.
yeah, check this list out, add something to your garden, get out there, look for some of those weekly bloom things that we talked about. Fast forward back or rewind back into this episode and listen to that little segment again and get out there and look for some of this stuff.
And if there's anything on here, and I hope this isn't a conflict of interest with your retail job.
No, what?
But if there's anything on here that really rings your clanger, wait till it's done blooming to buy it, because oftentimes things like this they'll go on sale because they need to move them out for other things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
man, Bob's gonna murder you. So, Bob, that was all Tim, not me.
Well, I mean, people buy all this stuff up when it's in bloom, but then once it's done blooming, people are like, "What's that?" And then they have to lower the price to move it out. So,
trying to get me fired over here.
Yeah, sorry.
So, no biggie, Bob. It's all good. All right, peeps, that's it for us.
Rock on with your cock on,
Love
Mike.
you harder, all +2.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Love you harder.
No, you don't.
Bye.
Bye.